Week 4, the baby is the size of manly stubble, a glitter fleck, a grain of table salt, and a dot from a number 2 pencil. Week 5, baby is the size of the eye of a large needle, a Pop Rocks crystal, and the heart button on Instagram and Facebook. At week 4, the ball of cells that the fertilized egg has turned into is now splitting into the embryo and the placenta, and baby's neural tube is developing, which is the backbone, so to speak, of the spine and brain and the spinal column. And the amniotic sac and fluid are already forming. Week 5, the neural tube is complete and grown together, and baby is already starting to differentiate cells into heart, stomach, liver, and kidney and other digestive and circulatory and nervous system tissues already. It's pretty amazing. Hello everyone, this is Amanda with Eat, Pray, Crunch. I make videos twice a week about moderately crunchy parenting and lifestyle. So if you want to see more videos, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the little bell next to the subscribe button so you can get a notification every time I put up a video. So by now, you guys already know our news. We are pregnant! And I'm sure you guys have already watched our announcement video and all of my initial videos of me taking my live pregnancy test and watching the progression of the lines get darker for the first week or so, and just discussion about how we decided to go for baby number 3 and how quickly it happened and all of that. So be sure to check out all of those videos. I've created a new playlist for this 3rd pregnancy. I can't believe I'm making pregnancy updates again. This is really surreal because that is how I started my YouTube channel 2.5 years ago. When I was first pregnant with my daughter Sophie. And oh my gosh, I can't believe that I'm doing this again and I'm still on YouTube now 2.5 years later. I'm really glad that I am able to document this process once again. I'm so glad that I did with my pregnancy with Sophie. I'm so glad that I have that documented, and just for myself and for her, I think it'll be so interesting for her down the road. If she becomes a mother one day, I think it'll just be really interesting for her as well. So if you guys want to see that whole pregnancy playlist from my 2nd child, I will have that linked here in the cards. In the end slate of all of these pregnancy videos, I'll also link the corresponding week from my previous pregnancy, just so you can compare week by week how my pregnancy symptoms were this pregnancy versus my last pregnancy, because it might be kind of interesting to see. I think I'm going to watch them over again just to see how it compares this time around. That being said, I've mentioned in my previous videos that when you are seeing this video, it is not current to date. I will be posting this once I am officially in my 2nd trimester. Things can happen, so I will probably be posting my 1st trimester updates, you know, maybe twice a week or even 3 times a week until I am caught up to the present. And when you're seeing this video, I am probably in my 2nd trimester. So just keep that in mind when you're watching these. These are kind of looking back. I'm filming them as they happen, but you guys will be seeing them later. And then once we catch up to the 2nd trimester, then I will try to keep on track week by week in real time. So, and I will probably be doing them midweek. I think that's how I did it with my last pregnancy. Some people like to do it right as your date changes over every week. Some people like to do it at the end of that week just so you can describe everything that happened in that week. I think I'm just going to do it, you know, in the middle of the week every week, just because I don't want to be too hard on myself, you know, having to get it on an exact day every single week, just because we have a very busy lifestyle. We have a preschooler and a toddler and we have a lot going on. So I just want to have that flexibility of, you know, being able to do it within a window of a few days rather than on a particular day. The belly shots that I'll be showing at the beginning of these videos will be midweek for that week. So the one that you saw for this update is for 5 weeks. For some of my 1st trimester videos, I might do 2 weeks per video. We'll see what I decide to do. But for this one, I'm doing weeks 4 and 5 in this video. In terms of symptoms, I mentioned it a little in one of my previous videos, but week 4, I am assuming that I ovulated like 3 days early. The first day of my last period was January 8th, or if I was on a normal 28-day cycle, that means that I would have ovulated on January 22nd, but I think I ovulated on the 19th. TMI alert. If you guys are watching pregnancy updates, you'll know there's going to be some TMI in here. So if you're squeamish about pregnancy stuff or you don't want to hear this stuff, then don't watch. I basically was going by my mucus this month. I know pretty accurately where I am in my cycle according to my mucus, because back in the days, you know, when we were trying to conceive our first child, I did a ton of charting and I just learned my body really well then. So I don't take temperature anymore, but I am really aware of my cycle according to my mucus. That is basically how we have prevented getting pregnant up to this point, doing natural family planning, just avoiding those fertile times or using barrier method during that time. And now we did the inverse to get pregnant, and voila. Like I said in my previous video, I am pretty surprised that it happened again on the very first try. If you know our history, we had a very large struggle with infertility when we were trying to get pregnant the first time, and we ended up trying for a year, and then we did IVF and the IVF failed. And then we miraculously, naturally got pregnant with my son 2 months after that. And then I've talked about how when my son was first eating solids, we really kind of changed our diet to a more traditional, like Weston A. Price kind of diet, which is basically eating the way humans ate before the advent of processed food, is the best way I can put it. And we do follow the 80-20 rule, which is we follow that kind of diet about 80% of the time, and 20% of the time we don't worry about it, just because it's a lot better for your mental health that way when you're not worrying about it and trying to be perfectionistic about it. So anyway, long story short, that diet changed our lives, and we are convinced that it completely reversed our infertility issue. It was male factor infertility that we were dealing with, and I have that whole story linked here. So if you want to see that whole story, be sure to watch that. I made a whole video of that a couple years ago. And so all this time we have been eating mostly that way. It has just turned our fertility around, because when we tried to get pregnant with our second child, the first or second time we tried, we got it like that. And that's how we know that our fertility was reversed, was because we got pregnant the very first try after this huge struggle we had had. And unfortunately I ended up having a miscarriage that time. I have my miscarriage stories, I'll link those here. And then the month or two after that, we tried again and got it on the first or second try. And then we ended up taking a break because we were moving. And then the month we were in our current house now, we got pregnant with my daughter Sophie. So ever since my son was born and since we changed our diet, we have been able to get pregnant on the very first try. And I'm still in awe that diet and lifestyle has really made that much of a difference for us. Like, it's just amazing to me because here we are again, very first try. This month we got it on the very first try. So praise be to God. So yeah, my husband was laid off in January, and so, you know, I'm sure people are wondering, like, is this really the best time to be getting pregnant when your husband is laid off? And honestly, we really felt like it was a nudge from God. Like, I just had this gut feeling that this is time. And that in addition to, we really are comfortable financially right now. We had a peace about it. We felt like, you know, even if we get pregnant now, like, we are just trusting that he will have a job by the time this baby comes. And so that we weren't worried too much about that. And just logically speaking, just the fact that he is at home right now, that makes it ideal for getting through the first trimester, right? Because I remember my first trimester with my last pregnancy, you know, the fatigue and the nausea, it was so hard to get through when my husband worked such long hours, and I was trying to parent my 1.5-year-old at the time, and it was hard. It was really, really hard because you can't just lay around on the couch all day like I did with my first pregnancy when I felt like crap, you know? So I was thinking, this time around, if my husband is here, then he can really help me get through that first trimester and help with the kids when I am really not feeling well. And so it actually is really good timing in that way. Assuming that I have a rough first trimester again, because I'm just assuming that because the last two were rough as well. So that's kind of the background of how we decided that this was the right time. Let's jump right into symptoms for week 4. The first symptom I had started about a week after I believe I ovulated, and I started getting sore boobs. That was the very first thing that I felt. It was mild at first, and each day it progressively started getting more and more, and that was kind of like red flag. Before I had kids, I used to always get sore boobs before my period started, but then after having kids, that PMS symptom kind of went away for me. But the fact that they were so sore was like, they don't usually get that sore these days. So I was wondering, and you know, the day after I started feeling that, I started getting tired already. I remember napping that day, like unintentionally. I had intended to like fold laundry or do something, and I ended up just falling asleep on the bed. And so I was like, that's another possible sign. And then I decided to test at 10 DPO. And to me, it looked negative. I had just those little internet cheapy strips that I got off Amazon. They were actually left over from my pregnancy with Sophie, so I had this huge stack of them. They expired, but I used them and they still worked. DPO, if you don't know what that means, it means days past ovulation. And if you're in the trying to conceive or TTC world, you're familiar with all that jargon. So at 10 DPO, it looked pretty negative to me, but I saved it because I was like, it's still pretty early. It's hard to say for sure. So I waited 2 days and then I tested again. And that is the live pregnancy test video that I have posted here. And that's when it was positive. I got a faint line, but it was definitely there. So that was about 12 DPO. This is technically my 5th pregnancy. You'd think that seeing a positive pregnancy test for the 5th time, like you'd be like, oh, well, you know, here we go again. But I was still like nervous, and it had that nervous and excited feeling because it's exciting every time, and it's a miracle every time. And was just so happy. So the day I got the positive test was 12 DPO, and that was January 31st. At 13 DPO, I actually had my first nausea. And I know what pregnancy nausea feels like now because I've done this a couple times before now, so I'm familiar. It's a very unique variety of nausea. It kind of feels like motion sickness almost. It's not like, you know, when you're sick to your stomach, like because you ate something bad or you have a stomach flu. It feels different than that. Like it's a little bit in your head too. I mean, as it is in, you feel almost like the dizziness in your head a little bit, and it's hard to explain. You mamas who've been pregnant before, you know what I'm talking about. But I felt that most of 13 DPO, and then I didn't feel any nausea again for several days after that. So it was interesting that I just had it like that one day. 14 DPO, I think I actually saw a little bit of implantation bleeding, and I don't know if I've seen that before, which is interesting. Like just in the shower, there was just like this one little streak of blood, like teeny tiny little streak of blood, and that was it. And so I think that's what I saw. So I'm kind of glad that I saw that this time, just because it's interesting thinking like, oh, that's what that was. And then 15 DPO, my face started breaking out. I mean, a lot of these things are normal PMS symptoms also, but yeah, it really started that day. And then 16 DPO, I really feel like the fatigue really started setting in then. I was starting to feel like I needed to nap multiple times a day, and I started having vivid dreams. That started right away as well. That was a constant symptom that I had with both of my last pregnancies, just the really, really intense vivid dreams. Having been through this a few times before, I know it is so normal to just be really moody and hormonal, and thankfully my husband, since he has been through this with me a few times now, he knows when to say, I know that's the hormones and not you speaking, and so I'm glad that he has that perspective and has been really supportive. So I'm trying to not let my sometimes grumpy mood totally take over, and I'm trying to control it, but sometimes that doesn't always happen. Then on 19 and 20 DPO, I actually had just a little bit of pink spotting, and it was just, I didn't completely freak out just because I know it's normal to have a little bit of spotting in the first trimester, but it did, you know, put me on edge just a little bit, just since I have had 2 miscarriages in the past. I was like, what's going on here? But it ended up being nothing more than just a tiny little bit of pink, and that was it. I had it, you know, for maybe an hour or 2 in the morning on both of those days, and nothing else. And I ended up going to the doctor that day just to get things checked out, just to make sure everything was okay. And they did an exam and said everything looked really good in there. There's no signs of blood, and cervix was nice and tight and closed. And I also had my progesterone levels tested, because in my last 2 pregnancies, they had me on a vaginal progesterone because I had a miscarriage history. So I talked with my primary care doctor about that, and it turns out with our current insurance situation, it was kind of difficult for me to get. And so I was like, well, let's just wait and get the result from the lab and see if that looks normal. And if it's normal, then I'm not going to worry about supplementing this time with the progesterone. So I got it back and it was normal. And so she just wants me to go in another week just to make sure it continues to stay normal. And if it starts to look a little low, then we will go on that medication. And then after that, the bloating set in. Oh my gosh. It's normal for me to bloat in my days leading up to my period, and I had been a little, but it got like intense. And you know, I remember my first couple pregnancies, like I freaked out about that, because it was like, I look 6 months pregnant already because I am so bloated. And no different this time. Being that I have been through this many times before, I'm glad that I have that experience now, because I'm not freaking out about it this time. Like, my vanity is gone out the window. I'm just like, I've got a pooch now. I've got a mom belly, and I especially start showing really, really early, and it's mostly bloat. Obviously not baby until later, but I definitely have intense bloating from the beginning. Oh, and the other thing I had, another TMI alert, the other symptom that I got was a yeast infection, which I talked about with my doctor when I went in as well. I haven't had a yeast infection in, like, I can't even remember, like, since I was a kid. It's very, very unusual for me. So I think that that's entirely possible that that was just, you know, a pregnancy symptom that I happened to get this time in this pregnancy. And I know it's really common to get yeast infections in pregnancy just because pH is off, your hormones are wacko and crazy, and it can do weird things to your body. So that was actually another thing that made me think, you know, because that showed up before I actually got my positive pregnancy test. So yeah, I've been doing treatment for that, fun times. And then the last couple days I seem to have, I don't even know if it's pregnancy related or what, but I think maybe I got some sort of intestinal bug. Hasn't been fun. I'll spare you the details, but at least things have been moving in the right direction, but it's still been unpleasant. So that's how I'm doing in terms of week 4 and week 5 and my symptoms, and I have had a lot of them. So be sure to check out my next pregnancy update. I made a lot of my YouTube friends that I am still friends with now. We were doing our last pregnancy updates with our last child, and I'm just excited to do that again. So if you guys are pregnant now and at about the same stage, be sure to leave a comment below. I would love to follow your journey too if you are also at about the same stage as I am. I love just having that mama village with other mamas who are going through the same things at the same time. It's just so nice to have that support, because YouTube is such an amazing community. And I'm looking forward to going through this pregnancy journey with you guys. So thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.